Okay, so this Bible study is continuing our study of the book of Genesis, and we're starting in chapter 22, verse 20. And we're taking a pretty long text. In fact, I'm going to break it up into two reads. We're going to spend a lot more time in the chapter 24, but we're going to go all the way through chapter 24, verse 27. So the first part says read Genesis 22:20 through 23:20. And that says, sometime later, Abraham was told, Milcah is also a mother. She has borne sons to your brother Nahor, Uz the firstborn, Buz his brother, Kemuel the father of Aram, Kesed, Hazo, Pildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. Bethuel became the father of Rebekah. Milcah bore these 8 sons to Abraham's brother Nabor. His concubine, whose name was Reumah, also had sons, Tabah, Gaham, Tahash, and Makah. I'll just say um, this produces, this is significant because it gives us the where Rebecca came from, which is what we focus on then in chapter 24. So this is sort of a foreshadowing. It's inserted in there to bring meaning to chapter 24. Or at least bring context to it. Chapter 23 says Sarah lived to be 127 years old. She died at Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went out to mourn for Sarah and to weep over her. Then Abraham rose from beside his dead wife and spoke to the Hittites. He said, I am a foreigner and a stranger among you. Sell me some property for a burial site here so I can bury my dead. The Hittites replied to Abraham, Sir, listen to us. You are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will refuse you his tomb for burying your dead. Then Abraham rose and bowed down before the people of the land, the Hittites. He said to them, If you are willing to let me bury my dead, then listen to me and intercede with Ephron, son of Zohar, on my behalf. So he will sell me the cave of Mashpelah, which belongs to him and is at the end of his field. Ask him to sell it to me for the full price as a burial site among you. Ephron the Hittite was sitting among his people, and he replied to Abraham in the hearing of all the Hittites who had come to the gate of his city. No, my lord, he said, listen to me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of my people. Bury your dead. Again, Abraham bowed down before the people of the land, and he said to Ephron in their hearing, Listen to me, if you will. I will pay the price of the field. Accept it for me from me, so I can bury my dead there. Ephron answered Abraham, Listen to me, my lord. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver, but what is that between you and me? Bury your dead. Abraham agreed to Ephron's terms and weighed out for him the price he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver according to the weight current among the merchants. So Ephron's field in Mashpelah near Mamre, both the field and the cave in it, and all the trees within the border of the field, was deeded to Abraham as his property in the presence of the Hittites who had come to the gate of the city. Afterward, Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave in the field of Meshphlah near Mamre, which is at Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave in it were deeded to Abraham by the Hittites as a burial site. So number one is going to cover this text, and it's just to kind of make sure we understand what happened. I'm not sure how much profound spiritual significance this has, but it does give good background for sort of future texts about places in Canaan and the significance of Hebron. Um, But number one says what is happening in 22:20 through 23:20. Abraham's family also had children. And that sounds kind of flippant, but given that we're going to talk about Abraham's desire for Isaac to have a wife from his people, and not from the Canaanites, which we find out about in chapter 24, then that becomes even more important that over there where Abraham is from, people are still living and having children, and the family goes on. So then B, Sarah died. That's sort of the basis for chapter 23 here. C, Abraham asked to buy a field and a cave in order to bury his dead since he is a foreigner and this is not his land. This is obviously a simplification. He goes to the elders and says, I want to bury my dead here and I know this is not my land. I'm just a foreigner here. And their response to him, I think, was significant. And maybe that's the most significant thing, that Abraham was well respected amongst the people with whom he lived or around whom he lived. The Hittites basically said, "You're a prince." They said, "You're a prince among us. Take whatever field you want." He was well respected. He was obviously sort of wealthy. And financially able. Um, so then he says, okay, I want this specific one that belongs to Ephron the Hittite, and Ephron was there. Ephron the Hittite offered to give him the field that he asked for. He says, here it is, it's yours. But Abraham insisted on paying for it, and he accepted that pay. It's funny because he insisted on paying for it, and Ephron said, it's worth 400 shekels of silver, but what is that between you and me? When I heard that, I thought, I think that's a significant sum of money, but these were two obviously wealthy people, and Ephron's sort of statement was, it has this value, but that's like nothing between us. So these are two wealthy people. I think about it this way. My grandma had throughout my childhood. I remember, like, she would know that my mom needed something, so when she was at the store she would pick something up, but like when she brought it home she'd keep the receipt, and I'd literally watch them exchanging money and my grandma going to try to find change so that they could get it down to the penny. And my mom never really worried about that, but my grandma would, like, it was important. I bought this for you. Now you're paying for it. This is how much it is, down to the penny. And the same would be true vice versa. It wasn't like she was sort of greedy or whatever, needed every penny, but it was just like sort of the principle of the thing, that this is how much it costs. This was like, we weren't buying each other gifts. I was picking this up for you. Of course, my grandma was also the one that would, cut coupons and then go to the grocery store clear on the other side of town to save 15 cents. She spent twice as much in gas. And so she, didn't probably realize that in many cases, like, it really wasn't about saving money or getting money. Like, that was never the point of it. The point is what seemed right to her. But I always remember thinking, if you raised, this child, that she owes you everything. Like, why are we arguing about penny? And they didn't argue. I don't mean it like that. But why are we even discussing pennies? Like, honestly, let's just give it back and forth. What's the point? Because we're never going to get to the place where we're even. But I just thought how silly it seemed that they were talking about pennies. Pennies back then meant more than they do today. Today, we don't even bend over to pick up a penny, because it's lost value to that point. But, um, I just kind of think that it felt like when Ephron said this, what is that between me and you? That to them, this money was like pennies. What's the point of paying for it? But if you want to pay for it, if that's what seems right. So that's kind of how I received this discussion, is they were willing to give it. Um, the people that were having this discussion were wealthy and influential, and it wasn't about the cost. Abraham would have bought anything, and whatever the price, he would have paid it, um, because he needed this thing, or he was asking for this thing. Um, but also, they didn't seem to care that he paid for it. They would have given it to him too. And honestly, I know that in our church in particular, we're not wealthy, and many people don't feel wealthy in our modern era. Even people that are wealthy don't feel wealthy because of the state of the economy and things like that, and how tenuous that all seems in some instances. But I've always thought that that's kind of how we ought to be, like the discussion that they had, and that we ought to be. What's $20 amongst us? Like, you need $20. Here's 20. Like, a friend. I'm not talking about. We can have a discussion about what it means to help the poor and whether we're really helping if we give money and things like that. But I'm talking about amongst brothers and sisters in Christ. If somebody in the church needed money, and I've paid for money to help somebody get their car away from the tow yard. I've given money to help somebody with a bill that I knew they had, and one time I had somebody say, I'm sorry, Pastor Pete, I still owe you $20. Like, and it was like a year or two later. And I got the feeling they'd have been avoiding me because they knew they owed it to me and that was bothering them. And I said, look, I've forgotten what that was even for. That's not important to me. And I kind of think that, well, when I read in the book of Acts and it says none of the believers considered any of their possessions their own, that actually ought to be the way that we are amongst the people of God. That we ought to be generous, not greedy, and we should not be worrying so much about the cost of anything, or um, we should be caring for one another that way. And the trust and the respect that they seem to have in this setting seems like it connects with that. Okay, so then it says read 24, chapter 24, verses 1 through 27, which says, Abraham was now very old, and the Lord had blessed him in every way. He said to the senior servant in his household, the one in charge of all that he had, put your hand under my thigh. I want you to swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not get a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I am living, but will go to my country and my own relatives to get a wife for my son Isaac. Now, the hand under the thigh thing seems really strange to us, but it's almost like putting your right hand up and putting your left hand on the Bible. That's how we understand an oath today, or I swear to tell the whole truth, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, something like that. We understand that. It's almost pinky swear seems silly, but it was a sort of a common, this is representative of the promise that I'm making to you. The servant asked him, what if the woman is unwilling to come back with me to this land? Shall I then take your son back to the country you came from? Make sure that you do not take my son back there, Abraham said. The Lord, the God of heaven, who brought me out of my father's household in my native land, and who spoke to me and promised me on oath, saying, to your offspring I will give this land. He will send his angel before you so that you can get a wife for my son from there. If the woman is unwilling to come back with you, then you will be released from this oath of mine. Only do not take my son back there. So the servant put his hand under the thigh of his master, Abraham, and swore an oath to him concerning this matter. Then the servant left, taking with him 10 of his master's camels loaded with all kinds of good things from his master. He set out from Aram Naharim and made his way to the town of Nahor. He had the camels kneel down near the well outside the town. It was toward evening, the time the women go out to draw water. Then he prayed, Lord God of my master Abraham, make me successful today and show kindness to my master Abraham. See, I am standing behind this spring, and the daughters of the townspeople are coming to draw water. May it be that when I say to a young woman, please let down your jar that I may have a drink, and she says, drink, and I'll water your camels too. Let her be the one you have chosen for your servant Isaac. By this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master. Before he had finished praying, Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulder. She was the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, who was the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor. The woman was very beautiful, a virgin. No man had ever slept with her. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up again. The servant hurried to meet her and said, please give me a little water from your jar. Drink, my lord, she said, and quickly lowered the jar to her hands and gave him a drink. After she had given him a drink, she said, I'll draw water for your camels too until they have enough to drink. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough, ran back to the well to draw more water, and drew enough for all his camels. Without saying a word, the man watched her closely to learn whether or not the Lord had made his journey successful. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took out a gold nose ring weigh, weighing a beka and two gold bracelets weighing 10 shekels. Then he asked, whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? She answered him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, born to Nahor. And she added, we have plenty of straw and fodder, as well as room for you to spend the night. Then the man bowed down and worshipped the Lord, saying, be to the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not abandoned his kindness and faithfulness to my master. As for me, the Lord has led me on a journey to the house of my master's relatives. So number 2 says, what is happening now in 24, 1 through 5? So let's go back to the beginning. Abraham is old, yes. B, Abraham asked his senior servant to swear that he would not get a wife for Isaac from among the Canaanites, but would go to Abraham's country to get a wife for him. And this, by the way, is a theme as we move along. That Israel is not to marry those Canaanites, but rather, and we've there's been a lot of discussion and question in recent years, about whether this is like racism or what this is, but it had to do with the gods that people worshipped, and the Canaanites worshipped other gods, and that caused problems for the Israelites every time. And that this was before that was a command, but that was a concern for Abraham. It mattered to him. See, the servant asked for clarification about what to do if the woman would not come to his country, to this country. What if I go there and she won't come back to me? Do I take your son Isaac there, so that he can marry her? And Abraham says no. You're going to be released. In fact, number 3, what is Abraham's response? Make sure that you do not take my son back there. This has to do with the fact that Abraham knew what the call of God was, what he had been told. So he had been told to to come here, and God was going to give his family this land. So taking Isaac back, what if he never came back here? What if God's plan and promise was never fulfilled because Abraham's family went back and went back on what they had done in following God? So Abraham explained that God had called him out of the land and promised to give him this land. And then C, Abraham told him that if the woman would not come back, the servant is freed from his oath. So it was so significant, such a big deal to Abraham that he says, if she won't come back, then you'll be free. Now he also said, but the angel of God is going to go before you, and you're not going to be unsuccessful. You're going to be successful, which is really interesting, because we see God's hand at work through this. So number 4 says, what does the servant do according to 24:9 through 11? A, he swears the oath. B, he took 10 of his master's camels and set out for Aram Naharaim to the town of Nahor. And C, he had the camels kneel down near the well outside the town. It was toward evening, the time when women go out to draw water. So young women are coming out to draw water, and he's going to be here, and he's come up with a plan. And he's going to talk to God about it. So number 5 says, what did the servant do next? According to 24:12 through 14, he prayed. He prayed specifically that the person who he's going to ask for water, and they're going to say, not just am I going to give you water, but I'm going to give some for your camels too until they've had their fill. And he prayed that this person would be the one that God had intended for Isaac. So that was his prayer. Number 6, what was the result according to 24:15 and 16? Before he had finished praying. I love this. This was his prayer. Before he had finished praying, Rebecca came out with her jar on her shoulder. And it tells us who she was, but he doesn't know at first. The woman was very beautiful, a virgin. No man had ever slept with her, just in case you didn't know what virgin meant. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up again. So before he had finished praying, already there was a woman that he was ready to ask. So number 7 says, what happened according to 24:17 through 21? The servant hurried to meet her, and said, give me a little water for the jar. And she said, drink, my lord. And then she said, I'll draw water for your camels too. So this is the person. This is what he asked. Um, and she did it. She drew enough, and he's watching her closely, it tells us, to see if this is the person. Um, and everything is fulfilled as he prayed that it would be. Number 8, what happened next according to 24:22 through 25? When the camels had finished drinking, the man took out a gold nose ring weighing a beka, and 2 gold bracelets weighing 10 shekels. Then he asked, whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? So, he asked one more thing. She's already been generous, but he asked one more step. Is there room for us to spend the night? And she said, yes. And there's enough room for you. We have fodder for your camels. We have enough room for you. We have everything you need. And then number 9, what happened next according to 2:26 through 27? It says, then the man bowed down and worshiped the Lord, saying, praise be to the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not abandoned his kindness and faithfulness to my master. As for me, the Lord has led me on the journey to the house of my master's relatives. So he praises God. And I want to say just one thing. He prays, God answers prayer, he praises God. That's important. But also, we note that as he's praying, this is the Lord, the God of my master Abraham. And he notes the faithfulness God has shown to his master Abraham. But at the end of this, he says, and he's led me on this journey. So now the God of his master Abraham has also been faithful to him. And I just think, I don't know about this servant's interaction. I know Abraham's whole household was circumcised, so they were all set apart as sort of God's people. But definitely at the beginning of this story, there's this sense that this is Abraham's God, and the servant is worried about the outcome. What happens if, But Abraham says, the angel is going to go before you. This is going to be fine. And by the end, we see that the servant is noting God's faithfulness not only to Abraham but also to him. And I would love for us to have that kind of impact on the people around us. Um, for us to have the kind of faith that people see God's faithfulness to us, but then we say, but this is what God's going to do in this situation for you. And then people see that that faithfulness God has had for us also applies to them. And I think that can be such a powerful testimony, that people can come to know about God's faithfulness in their lives as well.